In this video, I'm going to break down how to use Infinity Tiled Rooms and Pools Modular Environment Asset Pack. So this way you can get started creating your own environments using this asset pack very quickly. If you're interested in getting this asset pack, I will include a link in the description to this video so you can pick it up. And this modular asset pack includes 2 showcase maps, 58 unique static meshes, 5 materials, 9 material instances, and 27 textures. And it will allow you to create a variety of interior liminal spaces layouts, such as these. So this video will include everything you need to know how to get started using this modular environment asset pack. So once you have the assets as part of your project, you will have 4 folders. You have your maps folder, materials, static meshes, and textures. Everything is organized, so you can just jump into each of the subfolders and find what you need. The very first one is maps, and there are 2 showcase maps. One is the asset showcase, and this simply has all of the assets, all the static meshes in one single map. So this way you can see what's available and what are the static meshes. And the second map is the showcase environment map. And this map includes all the static meshes constructed in the environment showcase. So this way you get an idea of what's possible. But of course, your layout and how you use these meshes are going to be up to you. So you can create far more intricate, far more complex layouts. So there are 3 parts of this environment. One is completely accessible from one area, and it's this one right here, this main area with the pool. And in this one, you can actually spawn anywhere if you have the player character as part of the game templates you may have included, and just walk around and walk through this entire hallway into any of these rooms and just kind of see what's possible and how you can use this to construct similar environments. However, if you fly outside, there are 2 more areas that are not accessible from the main area. The first one just includes a few more static meshes into a single room like this in order to showcase this environment in a single room with a single light, with few more construction pieces on the walls, as well as using some static meshes in a different formation, in a different construction. And then there's another room. If you fly up, this one includes a small area, smaller pool than the one in the main section, and also just simply showcases a different area of the environment. So to get access to these 2, you'll just have to fly outside and find these 2 sections so you can navigate into them and just take a look how they were constructed, how they were created. But the main area of everything you need is going to be found right here with the larger pool section in the bigger room. Now let's cover the use of static meshes. Let's go into the static meshes folder and you'll find 58 unique static meshes here. All of these meshes are modular and they can be used and snapped together to create a large environment such as the one you see here. To get the most use out of modularity, make sure that you are on a 10 unit grid system and you have grid snapping enabled. For some of the detail pieces, you may go down to a 5 unit snap size, but sticking to a 10 unit grid system, 10 unit snap sizes will ensure that you can snap all of these pieces together and create a large environment. So stick to 10, but sometimes you may lower it to 5 for more precision. All of these meshes already have a default material instance applied onto them. So for example, if I open up, let's say a wall, such as this 300 wall, you can see that I applied a material instance ceramic tile 03. And this material instance is going to be found inside the materials folder. We'll talk more about materials and material instances later, but just know that all of these static meshes have a default material instance already applied onto them. So all you would have to do is just drag any of these meshes and you see they already have a default material instance on them, so you can use them right away. However, if you need to replace it, you can, and we'll cover that later. So depending on the static mesh that you're using, you'll get a different material instance that's applied onto that mesh by default. So for most of the architecture, such as walls, floors, ceilings, you will have a material instance ceramic tile 03. So if I just open this one up, you can see ceramic tiles 03 material instance. For the ones that have a steel material, such as let's say this door, the default material instance applied to this one is material instance metal 01. So just keep that in mind. And for some other meshes, such as these lights right here, let me open up just one of them. Some static meshes have 2 material slots. So for the lights, it has a metal as well as an emissive property to where the light is going to be emitting or coming from. as well as some architecture pieces such as this doorway. Also has 2 material slots, one for metal and one for the ceramic for the tiles. So let me go ahead outside into this area right here. So that way I can just drag some of these meshes and just show you how they're used. So most of your construction will be done with the architecture pieces, your walls, your floors, your ceilings, columns, doorways, doors, and so on. Then there are additional pieces such as lights, then you have railings, and you have shapes. And those are additional secondary pieces that will be added into your environment to detail with. So main ones are going to be your architecture construction pieces. So all you need to do is just find what you want to use, and you can filter these by specific name, let's say wall, and then simply drag any of them into your level. And as long as you stick to a 10 unit grid system, all you need to do is just begin to duplicate and snap them next to each other to create a larger environment, larger hallways, and larger rooms. Let me go ahead and make the sun a little bit in a different direction so it shines a little bit more onto the environment. Let me raise it up. Here we go. So for basic construction of a hallway and a larger room, there is a wall that's 300. There is a half size for most of your construction, for walls, for ceilings, and for floors. That is 150. So the standard size of a wall, of a floor, and a ceiling is 300 units by 300 units and 20 units in depth. So all of these meshes have thickness to them so they can properly block and occlude light and give you the other side of a room so you can create far more interesting and complex layouts. And you don't have to worry about the other side since you already have geometry on the other side to use. So let me go ahead and actually snap this one next to this wall, and everything will line up to each other, 150 to 300 and so on. And then to create a larger hallway or a room, you need a floor, you need a ceiling. So let's look for a floor. Just drag a 300 floor and position it next to the wall. And as long as you line up the floor and the wall together, they will be aligned and modular together. So actually, let me delete these. So essentially, you would create one section, one piece of a hallway in this case. Let's duplicate this wall on the other side. And then you would select the pieces and continue to duplicate for a larger hallway. Now let's also position a ceiling. And let me delete the 150 piece. So let's look for a ceiling. And there are quite a few ceilings that I included. A flat ceiling that could be positioned on top. So let's go ahead and drag this over. And you can see everything will snap together as long as you are on a 10 unit grid system. The gaps will be closed up. So you can use to create a hallway that's just a regular square-like hallway, or it could be rectangular if you wanted to maybe include additional walls to go up, to duplicate them up. So you have a larger, taller hallway. So you can go 600, you can go 900. If you want a halfway size, 150, you can use a wall that's 115 size instead of 300. So you have quite a versatility and variety in the sizes of the rooms and hallways you could create. Let me go ahead and undo. As well as if you don't want a flat ceiling at the top, you can modify it and include a rounded ceiling. So I included quite a few rounded ceilings. There is a 150, there is a 300. And for easy swapping that you could do is if you have a mesh already placed, you can just simply select it, go into the details panel. Let's say I want to replace this ceiling with a different ceiling with this rounded ceiling. So I'll just have to replace 300 with a rounded 300 ceiling by dragging it into the details panel, into the static mesh property to swap it. In this case, I would just have to rotate it and move it over and make sure that it's on top and placed on top of the wall. And now you have a far more interesting layout, something that I already included. Let me go into one of these environments, something like this. It has a rounded ceiling and straight walls down. Far more interesting architecture that breaks up the rectangular walls. And then of course I included half pieces as well if you need a half piece to use for whatever reason. So this way you have a lot more versatility than just a single piece, a single rounded arching ceiling. So you have a half piece here, you have a 150, a 300, you have a 150 piece, you have a 300 piece. So this way you can use whatever you need for whichever section of the hallway you need to finish. And then once you have one small section of a, let's say a hallway completed, again, you would just select all the pieces and then you can duplicate them for a larger hallway and snap them together like so. This is essentially the quickest way to create. You create one piece of a room or a hallway and then select them all and duplicate them. You then have also doorways and archways. So an archway is just an archway that will not have a door position in between. So it's just a way for you to bridge two rooms together with an entrance. But then you also have a doorway that you could use. And when you use a doorway, let me drag these into the light. When you use a doorway, you have two doors that you can use to position if you needed to have a doorway. So you can actually use a doorway without a door, but if you are going to use a door, you need to have a doorway because the door and the doorway work together. The archway does not have a door to position in between. It's just an entrance to another space. To use a door inside a doorway, here's how this works. So for a door, the pivot point is very important, and it is positioned in one of the corners, in one of the edges, a vertex on the bottom. Wherever you see, let me rotate this door right here. I'm gonna actually duplicate it just to show you. There are hinges, and the hinges will specify where the pivot point for the rotation of the door will be. So both doors have this, and this will determine how this door can be rotated and opened. So it makes a lot more sense of how the real door would open. Let me delete this. So same thing for this secondary door with a little more the intricate abstract design on it. Also has a pivot point right where the hinges are. So if you have a doorway and you want to position a door in here, you have to be very aware of where that pivot point for the door will be. So you can go ahead and snap it and position that door into the doorway correctly. So then you will have to push this door and align it into the doorway. Let me actually take these two so I can rotate them. So you can see when the sun hits it, right over here. So the door has to be positioned almost on a corner of a doorway right there on the very near edge. This will ensure that when you open the door and you use it, there will be no overlap of this door with the doorway and the door frame. If you push this door too far in, let's say you want to have a doorway right here and you are going to open it, just be aware that if it's too far into the door frame and you open it, there might be some slight overlap here at the top. So I made sure that this door has to be positioned on a corner, just like a real door, on an edge at its pivot point with the doorway in order to remove that overlap with the door frame. Just due to the design, the rounded design, it's very specific on how you can position this door to eliminate that overlap. And that's going to apply for this door as well. So be very aware of how this door needs to be positioned. So the pivot point needs to be right on the corner edge of the doorway and flat, like so. So this door can only be opened outwards towards us right now, like so, where the pivot point is. So this ensures that there's no overlap. And if you need to position the door on the other side, so let's say you want to walk into a room and you don't want the door to open towards you, you would have to rotate the door and then position it into the doorway the other way, ensuring where the pivot point being on an edge of a doorway like so. So now this door would open away from us and there would be no overlap. So just pay attention to that pivot point on the doors and make sure you position that door properly so the pivot point is aligned with an edge of the doorway. You then also have half arches. So you have a full archway, can only be used by itself in order to enter into another space, so no doors will go here. But if you want this opening to be a lot larger, there are pieces that you can kind of use together to create a larger archway. So there's a half piece, it's actually a 150, and then you can use this half piece, can be positioned on top, and this will create a 450 wide opening instead of 300. So all of these pieces right here, these square pieces, they are 300, just like the walls. This is why you can easily swap, take any of these wall meshes, and let's say I want to put an archway there, I can just swap it, add a details panel, and just swap it out, and due to the pivot point, it will just be replaced. It's a great way to create rooms very quickly and just swap out to another static mesh, as long as it's the same size. But then let's say if you want this piece, the archway to be slightly bigger than 300, you can construct it together with 150 pieces. So you have a 150 corner, a halfway point, and then you can just duplicate this one onto the other side, or rotate it, and just make sure you align it. And actually, let me rotate one more, like so, and just align it with the other piece and snap it on top. So now you have a far more bigger opening for you to use. And of course, you can even extend it to even larger if you need it. Just duplicate it, snap it, and position this one. So this now is a 600 wide opening because we're using 150 pieces and 4 of them. So again, quite versatile and flexible kit just due to the amount of pieces and the versatility of it that you can include if you just use multiple pieces to expand on it. Of course, in addition to the walls, the ceiling, different types of ceilings, flat or rounded, archways or doorways, you also have windows. So if I scroll down here, you have multiple windows you could use. So here's a 300 piece of a window, which is just a rounded window frame. Then you have a 150 wall with a window cutout. And then you have a couple of half pieces that you can use to create a taller version of the window. So you have a half piece and then you have a connector piece. So this allows you to create very tall window openings. Something like this. Let me go ahead and position this on top. And I can just use this piece here on the bottom, move it up, duplicate it, rotate it, and then close up the top like so. So now you have a window that's a lot taller. And actually it's 450 in height, because we're using 150, 150, and 150 piece. Or you can even go higher to 600. Just simply duplicate this middle piece one more time and then snap the top one. So it allows you to create very tall window openings. And this is how I created this room right here, using these windows, these 450 pieces. And actually these pieces right here, I grouped them. So when you select them and you see them grouped, these are not a single piece, they're grouped static meshes together. So in order to break them up, just from this map construction so you can see it and kind of take them apart, just simply hit Shift G or right click on the group. If it's a large selection of a group, go to groups and ungroup. And now you'll be able to select individual pieces. And the reason I grouped them is so they're easier to use and construct with. Once you've created a single piece, I don't want to have to select them all. I just simply selected multiple meshes together and hit Ctrl G to group them, and now it's a single piece. And then I can just select them a lot easier than having to select each individual piece at a time in order to duplicate them. So grouping is going to become very useful. This way you can combine multiple meshes together into a single selection that will act like almost like a single mesh, and then you can just use those and duplicate them. And let me delete these. So whenever you are in this room and you select a piece, and if they happen to be all together, just like this, just know that these meshes are grouped together. They're not a single mesh. Shift G to ungroup, or select them all using Control left click to add to a selection and Control G to group. So that is for the main architecture elements, the ones that are going to make up most of your environment and kind of like the blueprint, the framework of your environment. There are a few additional pieces, such as of course the stairs. And you can see them here. These are 150 units up in height stairs. So let me go ahead and drag them out and look for stairs. Again, you can search for stairs and they will pop up. So they're narrow stairs. They go up 150 units in height, as well as for the 300 stairs, little wider stairs. And they also go up 150 units. If you want to go higher to 300 units, because most of the floors are going to be 300 units. So let me duplicate this wall. So your first floor is going to be 300 units in height, unless you go higher by duplicating additional walls going up. So your room could be higher than 300. But standard room size for these static meshes is 300 units in height. And they give a very realistic, very good size dimension for a standard room, 300 units. But the stairs only go up 150. So in order for you to go up to 300, you just simply duplicate these set of stairs and move them and snap them together. And I did this because I wanted to allow you to have 150 units in height for the steps. And then if you wanted to go 300, you just simply duplicate the same static mesh in order to go to 300. So this will now line up with the wall for your second floor. So you can just simply take the same set of stairs, duplicate it to go up to 300 or higher if you need it. But the 150 piece is what will allow you to do things like this. Just create half steps, going down 150 units, as well as the narrow steps like you can see here. Just a lot more variety than a single 300 units in height that doesn't give you that additional half steps or half floor stairs to use. As well as, of course, the narrow stairs are very helpful. And you may need it to create a little bit more narrow hallways, narrow corridors, areas to go up or down into the lower or higher floors. And I also included a single step So there may be instances where you may need one single step to use in order to bridge the gap. Maybe there's certain meshes the way you use them and you just need that one step to go higher or to go lower. So I included one single step for 150 and the 300. And when I say 150, it's the 150 in width for the smaller one, for the narrow one, and 300 in width for the larger stairs. So you may need to use a single step for whatever reason, or you may even just use these single steps and create just a few steps going up somewhere. So again, giving you a lot more versatility. Now, when you use these single steps, you can see that they are not being snapped together. This is due to their size. So a single step height is 15 units and the depth of them is 30 units. So in this case, you will need to lower the grid down to 5 in order to have them snap together. And then once you're done creating, let's say just 3 steps going up, you can group these 2 or 3 together, Control G, so that way you can make an easier selection. And then make sure you go back up to 10 units to construct the rest of your environment, because it's a lot easier to work at a 10 unit grid system. But like in this case, for the steps, you will need to go down to 5 to make sure they snap. And then another very important piece of geometry that you need to know about are the filler gaps. So there are 3 meshes. Let me search for gap. You can search for filler or gap. 3 of them will come up. There are 3 pieces that will allow you to create or fill in the gaps for certain parts of your construction. And this is going to be the gap filler 300 by 20. This is perfect for in between doorways and archways. And then you have a 150 by 150 piece. Sometimes you may need to close up a smaller section that's 150 by 150. And this one can be used for walls, for floors, or for ceilings. And it just depends on the construction that you're using, how many pieces you're using, and if you are using 150 walls along with 300 walls. And there might be instances where you may need just a 150 by 150 piece. And then you have also a 150 by 20 piece. And these two are kind of the same. It's just one is 300 and the other one is 150 in width. So the way you use these is, let's say you have a doorway, and right here underneath the door, you will need to position something to close up that underneath the door or archway gap. Because most of the time you're gonna have, let me just show you right over here. So whenever you are bridging the gap between 2 rooms, you will end up having a floor and a wall. They're going to be aligned together like so. You can see that they are perfectly aligned. But then when you include an archway or a doorway, you will position it right on the corner. So you will have a gap right here. Naturally, you will have a gap in between the 2 rooms being connected by an archway or a doorway. Now you could take the floor and just push it over, which will work completely fine. It's just now it kind of creates a smaller section of a hallway because you are using that additional width to close up the gap for another piece of geometry. However, to make things easier to construct, you'll find that in between archways and doorways, it's easier to leave that gap. So you can maintain modularity and easier way of construction for the rest of the hallways and rooms by aligning the floor, the wall, and the ceilings together like you did for the rest of the hallways and rooms. But you will have that gap that you'll need to close up. So in this case, this is why I created a couple of pieces, and primarily for this case, you have a 300 piece, 300 by 20, and then a 150 by 20. So in this case, you would just drag the 300 by 20, position it, and then rotate it and align it to close up that gap. Because that gap is 20 units in width or 20 units in depth. You would just have to make sure that it's positioned and aligned underneath the archway or the doorway. And now you closed up that gap. And that's how I created for most of these gaps right here. Let me see. Yep, right here. There's a 150 piece. There's a 300 piece. Same for the doorways. You can see that I added a filler gap right here, which is a 300 that goes underneath the entire doorway. And you'll find these pieces pretty much everywhere where they transition from one area to another using that doorway or an archway. Here's another one. And this kind of continues across the entire construction. It makes things a lot easier when you transition from one room to another, and you don't have to make sure the alignment eventually is going to be off somewhere. But these filler gaps make things a lot easier to use and transition into other environment spaces. And then we have additional pieces of architecture, which are columns and pillars. And I just named them all columns. So if you just search for columns, there's quite a few here. There is a square one that's 300 in height. There's a 150, of course. And then you have rounded 150, 300 and then the 150. Again, which allows you to create 450 units in height if you use them together, or You can even just use a single one if you have a space that you need to have that's 150 in height. The half pieces always allow you to create a little bit more interesting spaces with different heights and different widths. So these can be used together, and I use them in this room right here. And in this case, for these, I used 300 and then 150. And then of course you have some square ones, which I used to kind of detail the areas right here to create nice openings and kind of break up the flatness of the hallway on the left hand side. And these are the square columns. And then you have additional smaller columns right here, which is going to be your column steel. So you have a 300 and you have a 150. And the steel columns, they're slightly smaller. Let me go back to this area right here. They're smaller than the square and the rounded ones. So let me just drag them just for size reference next to each other. So you can see they are smaller in size, but they give you additional versatility of having different columns to use for adding detail to your walls, to your hallways, and to your rooms. So you have a 300, you have a 150, and you have an archway. And you can use to create some interesting designs by positioning one on top of another, like so. And let me make sure that they are snapped together on top, right there. And these will perfectly align with the archways. As well as if you wanted to, let's say, continue this across here, you can use a 150 at the top. Again, all of them will snap, so I can rotate this one and then position it right there. And all I have to do is just make sure that they are snapped together right there. Done. And then let me go back into this area right here so I can show you right over here. So they work very nicely with the arch hallways or arch ceilings, so you can create that interesting design. Let me delete this one and this one. So you can see you can create some interesting break of pattern of flat walls by introducing these steel columns in a nice, interesting formations all together along with the archways to create far more interesting designs than simply having flat walls and just simply rounded ceilings. So that pretty much takes care of the environment construction, the main pieces. The rest are your secondary pieces, such as lights, railings, and shapes. So you have 5 different lights. You actually have 6 lights, but you have 5 main lights that you could use. So let me go ahead and search for lights. So here are 5 static meshes for lights. Again, simply drag them into your level. They're ready to use. And you have different shapes. You have your rounded shapes, you have more of longer shape lights, and then you have also a triangular light. Actually, let me delete them, and I'll just show you inside the level. So here's the light, and you can position them on top of the ceilings. Each of these lights have an emissive material applied onto them, and you can control the color, you can control the intensity of that emissive, and we'll talk more about it when we get to the material and material instances section. But the lights are ready to go. They have steel metal material applied for the rest of the mesh, and then you have emissive property for where the light is coming from. So these are your large round lights. You have your smaller lights. Again, you can position them on ceilings, or you can position them on walls, or even on floors. You can also take any of these lights and kind of, because they have a little bit of a detail on top of them, but if you decided to move them, you can push them into the ceiling a little bit more. Actually, for this one, I'm going to bring it down to 5 and kind of hide that extra frame, extra detail for just a different look. And these lights right here in this room, they happen to be grouped. So again, I group a lot of things together when you duplicate them. So I recommend you group things together also to make things faster. Again, to group, select multiple meshes, hit Ctrl G to group. To ungroup, Shift G. So here's a single light. So by lowering it to 5, you can just push some of these lights into the ceiling or into the wall just for a different look. So you have smaller rounded lights right here on the wall. You have your rectangular lights right here. And then you have your medium light, just a kind of a smaller light like this one. And then you have additional light, which is actually a shape. And I haven't gotten to shapes yet, but if you search for shapes, there's one rounded sphere which has an emissive property applied. And this is an interesting shape you can use for just abstract design, but you can also use it for lights. So here I have a room placed with that sphere. That's a middle light, as well as I'm using these shapes as a rounded ceiling light. And then I included additional shape, which is a shape rod. So kind of I use this shape rod here at the very top to connect to the ceiling and kind of give an illusion that this light is connected to the ceiling. And there's a sphere that gives off this illumination, this light. So you have your 5 main lights you can use, as well as this shape for your light source. And there's some interesting design that I created here by just using the shape rod a couple of times and then using this shape sphere as my light, and I duplicated it twice, and the second one I lowered in scale. So very interesting design you can create. Here's a 3-part sphere being used as a light source. And then since we are talking about shapes, and I already have them pulled up right here, these shapes are again secondary meshes that can be used as additional detail on top of existing geometry in existing rooms in your existing environments. And these shapes include a square or a box, a cube. Then you have your rectangular shape, and just allows you to use these kind of like Legos and create interesting designs, interesting abstract shapes to detail your rooms with. And here I just simply use the rectangular shapes and square shapes to create this flow area. And then you also have larger rounded shapes that you can use, like this one. And this particular one has steel border around it. So it has ceramic tile on the inside, and then it has detail, that's steel border on the outside. So here's one, here's a half sphere, and here's another one right here. And this one is actually 300, but it can be used and pushed into a wall to create kind of like a separation within a single room, without creating a wall, kind of like half a wall inside the room. So this could be used by pushing inside the ceiling, inside the floor, or even inside the wall if you wanted to rotate it. And actually, let me go into a room right here with the pool, and you can see that I used some of the rounded pieces right here to put them on the walls to create some interesting design, interesting abstract shapes to break up kind of the repetition of the wall by introducing these shapes. So these shapes are made to create some detail, whether you do it in a room as a standalone shape or attach them to walls or ceilings. And really, you can just combine all of these together in interesting different ways. You can scale them. Here's another way that I'm using some of these. So I'm using this larger piece, which has been scaled. Then I'm using this half piece, which is this piece right here, that's been rotated. And then I simply selected them all. I constructed them first as without the scale. Basically, I dragged all of these and I designed the shape. Then I selected them all and I scaled them in. However, here's the tip on how to scale things so they maintain the same design that you created. If I simply begin to scale them along specific axes, you can see they're now breaking apart. So design the pieces first at their original scale of 1. Then select them all and scale uniformly on X, Y, or Z together, this middle gizmo right here. So not individual, but uniform all together. And you can see that they maintain now the shape that I want. And you can see that if I try to scale along specific axes, they're going to break the shape. So uniform works. And then once you got the size of them correct and you want to come in here and maybe make them slightly thinner, and that's what I did, you can then scale on the specific axes just on the ones that makes them thinner, and they will maintain that size without breaking the entire shape and the entire design. So that's how I was able to make these smaller, and that's how you will be able to make these designs smaller and not break their construction. So very useful for breaking up some of the flat walls and using these shapes to create some interesting designs, some interesting abstract shapes. And then you have railings, and these will allow you to create secondary detail and block the player and create far more interesting designs and actually create the pool areas that you want. So let me go ahead and search for railings, and there are 9 railing pieces you can use, and you can take a look at the examples of how they are being used. So these are extremely modular. You can create corner pieces, you can create 90-degree pieces, you can create end caps, 180-degree pieces, kind of default on top of each other. You have your railings, you have your stairs and your pool railings here. So let me just show you some examples for how to use them. They're pretty simple to use and they all snap together. So you just simply begin to drag any of these. So here's a ladder. The ladder has a connection point on one side. So you just have to make sure you rotate of how this ladder would be connected and then attach it to a wall or a floor or a ceiling. Then you can also combine multiple of these ladders together and snap on top of each other if you want to have a longer ladder going up and down, just like I do here. There are 150 units in height. So by using 2 of those, you go up 300 units for the full wall. And then if you need to close off the top or the bottom, you have additional pieces, which are these pieces right here, ladder end. And you just simply drag them, and you just have to rotate them in the right way so you can close off the ladder and position them along the wall. So like I have it here. So that's the piece that I'm using to close this ladder off, as well as one for the bottom right here. If you reach the bottom, of course, you don't have to close it off. You can just push the ladder into the wall, into the floor, and close it up like so. If you're using the railing for the pool, you can use exactly the same piece and either continue by attaching it to a ladder like so. So you have the ladder, and here's the railing for the pool, entry into the pool. Or if you just want to use it by itself, like I have it here, just use that ladder end piece on the bottom and attach it together. So the ladder, let me search for just ladder. These three pieces are all that's being used in these, and they all work together for you to create larger ladder sections, as well as close them off with the end cap, with the ladder end, or attach it to a pool entrance. And then you have your railings, which are kind of separate pieces that should not be used with the ladders. And these are the ones that you use to create railings along the pool or anywhere else you want to include these. And let me go ahead and search for railings. And actually, let me go back to where the stairs are, and let me drag this 300 piece. So whenever you're using a staircase, you have a railing that can be used alongside the staircase. To make full use of this and to make sure that they are snapped, you have to place this railing on the third step. So right here, you have 3 steps going up. This piece right here, this vertical piece, has to be aligned on the third step, or make sure that the pivot point is on the edge of the first step. This will ensure that it will go all the way up to 150, and then you can continue your stairs, as well as if you want to continue this railing and attach it and kind of continue going all the way up, and they will be snapped together. Or let's say you want to end this, you just want to have 150 height of stairs going up, and you want to end this and kind of finish this off. Then you have an end cap that you can introduce that will work perfectly and will align with the stair railing. By dragging it, make sure you align with it, and you've closed it off. And this will work for the top, this will work for the bottom. So that's what I have right here. So I have the stairs, I have the railing piece, the rail for the staircase, then I have the end cap right here. Then I also have another piece, another railing starts over here for the straight. So the straight piece will work for the end cap, and the end cap will work for straight and for the stairs. There are also additional pieces for 90 degrees. So whenever you get a turn in railing, you just have to make sure you position these 2 railings in a way that creates a slight gap right here on the corner, and then drag a 90-degree railing corner piece and position in between them, and they will snap. So you just have to make sure that you have the right amount of a gap. If this railing is too close, like maybe right here, and you just don't have that gap created, you're not going to be able to use this. So just make sure you position it just right. Sometimes you may have to drag all 3 of these together so you can kind of find that distance apart from each other. And that's how I was able to create all of these. This one right here, this 90-degree corner piece right there. So put the 2 railings together, leave a gap, and then drag the 90-degree piece to close that gap up. And then if you need 180-degree turn, so let's say you don't want to close these up right here, you don't want to have an end cap, but instead you want to have these pieces kind of fold onto each other. So you have a nice railing for the stairs going up, and you have a 180-degree piece that you could use to create a different transition. Again, you just have to make sure that you have enough space that fits this 180-degree piece in between. And as long as you do, and you are maintaining your 10-unit grid system, you can see you can just snap it and you have a different connection point. Far more interesting than an end cap, and just a nice little design that you can vary. So let me just kind of show you. Here's a 90-degree transition piece for the railing going down, and here's an end cap. You also have a 150-degree piece that's not being used here, I don't believe. Yep, oh, never mind, it is. So I have a 300 piece for the railing, which can be expanded and continued for larger sections. But there are going to be times when you want to kind of have a shorter section like I do here. So I have a 150-degree railing. It's it's a half version of 300. So here's a 300, which is right here. And here's a 150, which is half the size. So it's for those sections where you want to have a shorter section and maybe you just want to have some space and you don't want to use a 300. And allows you to have a shorter section for the railing. And then here I closed it off. So these railing pieces are extremely versatile, very flexible, very modular. And you can see how I use them here in this larger pool section to block off this pool area. And of course, it doesn't require you to have a pool to use these. You can use these anywhere to create more interesting designs and kind of separation of space and to detail your environments with. So you have your railings and you have your shapes you can use to detail your spaces with. As well as, of course, you have your columns, you have your lights, and there's one more piece that I did not show you, which is called a wall corner. Let me type in corner, and it's these two pieces right here. You have a 150 and a 300. These are perfect for creating additional detail on wall corners. And if I fly up right here, they define where the edge corner will be, which is going to be right here. This is going to look outside, and in between right here in this section, in this L section, this is where the wall would go. So if you don't want to use a wall, let me search for a wall. So let's say you placed a wall right here and you don't want to have this corner, and instead you want to maybe use some kind of detail. You can use a column, or you can use this wall trim corner and just simply position it, snap it on a corner, and this will create nice transition. And of course you can even scale it to make it smaller, but it will fit a corner of a wall. Or if you want to make it smaller, let's say 0.5 and 0.5, it will remain the same size, but it will just be smaller in size on the corner. And if I fly over here, I have a couple of columns that I use these on right in this section. You can see that I took a square column, and actually all of this is grouped. So let me ungroup it, Shift G. So here's a square column, and here are small sections, those wall corner pieces that I'm using. They have been resized to 0.625 while maintaining the same height. And again, these are steel corners, and they add nice additional detail for these pillars, for these columns. So you can use them on columns and you can use them on corners of walls. Great additional detail that you could use on your geometry. And then one last mesh is a plane. It's a water plane. And actually I deleted it from here, but let me go into this pool area, and it's this right here. So I included a static mesh, which is a simple plane that has the water material applied onto it. So this is the one that you use to create the pool water in any area you want. So this mesh is very small, but you simply drag it into the level and then scale it. It already has a material instance for water applied onto it. And again, we'll cover how to use the material instances in just a second. We are almost done with the static meshes. But then you just drag the static mesh for the water plane, for the simple plane, scale it, and you can see it has the material applied, and it all depends on the distance that it's raised to the surface level, to the geometry below it. So you just scale this mesh to use the water. There is also tiling parameters to tweak the scale of the water, but that's in the material instance. But right now, for the areas where you want to have the water, just drag this plane wherever you want it, and then simply scale the plane. And then through the material instances, specifically for the water, you will be able to adjust many of the properties for how you want this water to look. This plane does not have collisions applied onto it. So if I take a look at the static mesh and take a look at blocking volumes, go to show, simple collision. It has no collisions, so you are free to walk through it and there's no collisions applied onto it. So with that, you have all the static meshes we covered on how to use them. Take a look at all of them, and I specifically recommend that you maybe open up the default map, the assets showcase, and take a look at all these meshes and just kind of get familiar with them. And then create a basic map, or even maybe use this map, just don't save it. And just mess around with these and create a very small environment with them to kind of get yourself familiar with how they're being used for maximum usability and for maximum flexibility of creating new environments with them. And of course, open up the environment showcase map and just fly around, walk through this environment and just kind of see how everything was constructed. select the meshes, see how they were being used. And remember, if you come across some meshes that are that look like one mesh, that means they have been grouped together. So simply Shift G on the grouped items to ungroup them, or right click and choose ungroup to break them up so you can see them individually. Now let's go ahead, cover materials and material instances and how to use them. I'm going to bounce around between a couple of sections of the map while showing you the material instances. So let's go into the materials folder, and you have 5 materials and 9 material instances. You have ceramic tile, a single master material, and from this material you will have 4 different ceramic tile materials or material instances. You then have 1 emissive master material and 1 material instance. You have a Lambert material, which is a very simple off-white material. I'm going to show you this now. And all it is an off-white base color that is used as a placeholder. So this is not being used anywhere on any mesh, and something that could be used during prototyping, or if you don't want to have any materials or material instances shown on any mesh. So this is just a placeholder, a work in progress material to use, and it's not being used anywhere in the final map. Then you have a master material for metal, and you have 3 material instances for metal created from this master material. And then you have a master water pool material and 1 material instance from it. Like I've mentioned before, all the static meshes have a default material instance applied onto them, and they have been assigned at a static mesh level, at a global level for each static mesh. So when you double click on each static mesh, you can see what the default material or material instance that has been assigned. And this is what you see inside the level. If you want to replace the material or the material instance being used for every single mesh, you simply go to the materials and use any of the material instances, open up the static mesh editor for each static mesh and replace it. So I can go ahead and, let's say, drag material instance, ceramic tile 01, save it, and every instance inside the map will be updated with that new material instance. Let me go ahead and replace it. Put it back. You can also update which material instance is being used per static mesh that's inside the level. And this is done inside the level itself, not inside the static mesh editor, by simply taking any of the material instances and just dragging them onto the static mesh and replacing it. And this will be updated locally for only this static mesh. And you can see right here, inside the details panel for this mesh, you'll have the new ceramic tile material instance 04. If I reset it to default, it'll revert back to what is defined inside the static mesh editor. So just a few quick tips on how you can update your material instances on a global setting or local setting per mesh inside the level. And this is pretty standard. So everything that you see that's being used is a material instance. And this is what I'm going to cover and go through some of the properties and settings that you can change and tweak. And the materials is where the instances are coming from, and none of these are actually being used on top of any geometry. Everything is from the material instance. If you need to take a look at any of the materials, just simply open them up, and I made that they are easy to look at and understand what's going on. So if you need to make changes, if you need to reverse engineer anything or update, you can do so. Everything has been commented out, it's nice and clean, and that is done for every single master material. So if you have an understanding on how to use a material editor, you should have no problem making changes, updates, or additions. So for the multiple material instances for the ceramic tiles and the metals, the first one, let me open the material instance, everything has already been set for you, which is pulled directly from the master material. So you can see nothing has been changed here. All the values are default. For any additional material instances for the 02, 3, 4, and just for the 02 and 3 for the metal, let me just open one of them up. I have additional textures being replaced and included. So you do not need to change any of these. So you will have 4 different ceramic tile textures that are being used and updated. And they are already updated inside the material instance, so you don't need to do anything other than go through additional properties to define the look, the color, and everything else within them. But you do not need to update the albedo or the grout or the normal map texture or the roughness that's being used on them. And you just simply change the rest of the properties but leave these alone. And this will apply for 02, 03, and 04. You can see all the proper textures have been updated for that material instance. And the textures are found here. Here's 01 base color, 02, 03, and so on. And each one has their own normal map, has their own masks, have their own roughness, and so on. And that applies also to the metals. So for the 01 material instance metal, Everything is a default being pulled from the material, from the master material, but all additional ones I've already updated the textures to correspond for that material instance. So all you have to do just to get started, simply drag any of the material instances on any mesh just to see what it looks like. So let me just go through really quick just by dragging them onto the static mesh wall right here. So here's the first ceramic tile. Here's the second one. All of them have different look to them. Here's the third one, and here's the fourth one. So they all have small tweaks, small adjustments, and different size to every single one of these. So this way you have 4 different ceramic tile textures or material instances to use, depending whichever one you want to use, as well as 3 different metals. Here's the first one, here's the second one with a slightly different look, and the third one does brushed metal. Let me go ahead and drag 03 on top of this, or let me reset it back to default. Now let's cover the use of ceramic tile material instances. As I mentioned, there are 4 material instances and they're all different. They use a different texture and they vary in size. You have larger tiles, medium tiles, and there are 2 of similar size, and then you have smaller tiles. All of these ceramic tiles can be used on walls, could be used on floors, and they will all match in grout in where they start and where they end. And this includes for the 300 wall and the 150 wall. Let me go over to a different section of the map, which is over here. So there is a 300 wall right here, and I can drag smaller tiles. You can see the end of them will line up, and there's a 150, and they will continuously tile due to how the UVs were set up. So I made sure that 300 and 150 can all use the same tiling material, the ceramic tiles, and they will all work. And that will apply for walls, for ceilings, for the doorways, archways, and any architecture static meshes. You can just simply replace and use any of these ceramic tiles. However, when you get to certain pieces like the column, let me duplicate this. The ceramic tile 01 and 04 are not going to line up. So for certain meshes, such as the column, either rounded or square, it's not going to tile completely. So if I drag the 01 on it, you can see that the way the UVs and the size of this mesh, I did not line them up because it would stretch out the texture too much. And same thing for the smaller tiles, 04. It's going to be a slight gap. So if this doesn't bother you, then you could use it. You can use the corner trim to hide it. Or you could also tile, because every single instance has tiling controls. So you could offset it and tile it and find a way to kind of take this edge and bring it to a corner. So you could make it work, but just know that 01 and 04 cannot be used by default on the columns, because it's just the way the UVs are set up at the size of this mesh. It's not going to completely go from corner to corner seamlessly like it is for the rest of the meshes. And the same thing also applies for the stairs. So if you take the stairs and drag 02, 03 will work seamlessly, but 04, you'll have a slight issue right here on the corner. Again, if that doesn't bother you and it's not very noticeable, you could go ahead and use it. 01 as well. This one probably is not going to work. It just doesn't look right. Again, it's all due to the UVs and how I chose to UV these meshes and which textures I decided to make sure that certain other meshes can work with. And for the stairs and the columns, you're going to have some issues with 01 and 04. But the tiling controls on the offset could make it happen. Let me go ahead and reset this. And let's go back to our section right over here by the stairs, our little testing environment. Alright, let me go ahead and reset this one back to default. Since we're using ceramic tile 03, the material instance, as our default, let's go ahead and open it up. Every single of these tile materials, ceramic tiles, will have the same controls. So if you open 01, all of these are going to be exactly the same for every single one. Does not matter whichever one you open. So we'll cover 03 since we have this material instance applied to every static mesh for the walls, for the floor, and the ceiling. So the first properties are going to be found under albedo. If you want to change the color of the tiles, simply enable albedo color and begin to change them. This will update and change the color of the ceramic tiles. The important part here, it's not going to change the grout in between. Those are adjusted individually. So I made sure that those two properties can be adjusted separately. Very important. So let's go ahead and set a different color for the tiles. Then you can also brighten the albedo if you need it. Make it brighter or darker. You can desaturate it or saturate it if you need it. And the way desaturate and saturate works is if you go above 0, it will desaturate. If you go below 0, it will saturate it. And then you have grout color control. So if you need to make that grout brighter, darker, or a different color, enable it and change it. So you can make it a different color or you can make it brighter or darker, thus updating everything across. You also have ability to desaturate and saturate the grout, but I'll just leave it as is right here. And then you have additional controls for design tile mask. So by default, let me go ahead and replace this really quick so it kind of goes back to the same one we're using. I'll just reset it to 03. So by default, you can see that it's just changing the uniform color of the tiles, which is good. But if you want to have a different mask, a different design of these tiles, and a different color for certain other tiles, simply enable and switch on design tile mask and then turn it on. When you do, a new set of parameters will show up and you can change a few properties. By default, you can already see it uses a different color for alternating tiles, a checker pattern. So it's using the albedo color, the one we changed, and then it's using a white color for the tile design. And these designs are being pulled from a mask. And you can see that right here, tile design texture mask popped up. And there are 3 different masks packed into a single texture that defines where this color change happens and what the tile design will be. If I jump over to the textures right here, you can see that it's using ceramic tiles 03, mask 02. I can just look at it by browsing to it right here. So click on this icon, it'll find that texture. And let me move this out of the way just to make sure I grab it. It's right here. I'll double click on it to open up the texture editor. And then let me go through the different texture masks that are packed into the R, G, and B individually. So it uses individual channel to pull that mask from it. So here's the one we're using. So white is revealing the mask, the color, and black is hiding it and revealing the original color. The second channel is the green channel, gives you a different look. So this is a second mask being used. And here's the third one. So let me go ahead and actually turn these on and show you what the designs will be. Let me switch back to material instance and you can change the tile design mask channels, which ones are being used. So here's the red. Let me switch this off and turn on the green channel. Here's the green channel and here's the blue channel. If you want a different color for that lower portion where the white is, simply enable tile design color and choose a different color to use. Very handy. So it gives you a different look, a different design color for depending on which pattern that you chose. Now, since this is being applied to every single instance, including the floor, now the floor also receiving the same thing, and the ceiling. So you may only want this for the walls, so you will simply have to create a new material instance without the design tile masks being used and apply them to the floor and the ceiling, so you can have a different look, different color, and maybe just remove that tile design that's being used for the walls, but not for the floors or for the ceilings. And the way you make a copy of a material instance, just go back to the materials. You would right click on the material instance you want to make a duplicate of, duplicate, and then just rename it to something else, maybe give a different color or just some kind of a name that signifies what those are. So flat colors. And then you would open this up. Let me double click on it and then just reset the settings. Let's just change this to red, for example. And then I'm going to reset everything to default and then turn off the design tile masks. So that's now off. It's using just the red color. And then you would apply it to the floors. And let me pull this off. It's right here, this one right here. So you would just apply those to different geometry, to different static meshes. So that way you just remove that uniform kind of repetition that's been applied for the walls and the ceiling. And you can create as many instances as you need with different colors, different design patterns. And with just albedo controls, you already have a lot of control for how the colors will appear and the design will appear. And if you want to take that further, you can introduce your own masks. So let me just pull up this ceramic tile 01 masks, because they're all different masks being used for different material instances, depending on the tile shape and the tile size. But you can introduce these yourself by creating a custom mask and then just simply knowing that black is hidden and white is revealing, and then just import it and use it as your own mask inside the material instance by plugging it into the tile design texture masks you want to use. Now, this is going to be outside the scope of this video, but if you know how, then you can introduce your own masks. But with these 3, you should have enough of variety that you can use and introduce. And then one last property is you can invert the mask. So it simply inverts the black and white values and changes them where they are, inverting the mask for a different design, different pattern to where the colors would appear. All right, let me go ahead and turn this off and just reset it. So we'll go back to just regular off-white. So to reset everything, just click on this icon right here to reset to default. So we'll go back to just the blue and let's set back, and actually I'll just reset it back to default. And also let's reset the grout. And just a small note, all these properties are going to be exactly the same for all the other material instances. Let me close these really quick. So if you open up 0, 1, you have the same properties to tweak. So we're only going to cover 1, but everything else is the same. So if you know how to use 1, you'll know how to use the rest of the material instances you have. And also, let me go ahead and replace the top and the bottom. I'll just select these and reset them to default. So we just go back to the defaults and we remove that red color that's bouncing off from the instance we had. The next property is dirt masks on or off. So I added the ability to have some dirt masks on top. So you can have your clean tile, but then you can also have some dirt being applied on top. When you turn this on, it's going to be very strong and exaggerated. And it's up to you to tweak it and turn it down and add more subtlety to it. It also uses 3 different masks right here, dirt mask texture. You can create and import your own to use, and they are all packed into a single texture, and you can use the red, the green, or the blue channel. Let me show you what this is. So I'll just enable it just so I can find it quickly by browsing to it. And let me go to the textures and open this up. So here's the red channel. That's what you are seeing right here. The black and the whites are defining what you see and what you don't. Here's the green channel, a different mask. And here's the blue channel. And by switching it to one or the other, you'll have a different dirt that's going to be applied to break up the clean repetition that you have. So here's the red. Here's the green. Let me maximize this. And here's the blue. Now for each of these, you have controls to make it fit into your environment. You have dirt color variation. So you can apply a different color to this. Let's go ahead and make it a little bit more rusty, maybe more green, whatever you want, maybe more brown. Let's just stick with a more darker gray with a better color of red. Then you can enable dirt mask contrast, so you can adjust the contrast of these. By turning it down, kind of mutes everything and reduces the contrast. You can then enable dirt mask opacity and increase it or decrease it, kind of match it more, make it more subtle. Maybe go back to contrast, maybe lower it, maybe increase it. And then you have roughness, dirt mask variation. I'm not going to cover roughness just yet, but this will simply enable you to control the roughness of the dirt, so it's not as shiny as the rest of the ceramic tile. So with this, you have some ability to adjust the dirt that you may have on the ceramic tiles. Now let's cover the roughness, and then we'll come back to the roughness for the dirt. So I'm going to disable dirt mask on or off, turn it off, and let's talk about roughness. So each ceramic tile will have, actually not just ceramic tile, every single material instance, and every material has a roughness parameter. Means how shiny or how dull that texture, that material is. And you can see that this specific ceramic tile has some shininess to it. The in-grout in between the tiles is not shiny, so that's how it's supposed to be. This is concrete and it's not very shiny. If you want to adjust how shiny or how dull your ceramic tiles are, enable roughness parameters. You have roughness minimum, roughness maximum, as well as you can enable roughness clean on or off. So if you don't want this little slight variation, just simply enable it and it will make everything very shiny. It still has a normal map, so it's reflecting a little bit, so it's bouncing the light off, but it removes that variation that you have by default. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm not going to use it, but you have that option if you need completely clean roughness to use. And then with roughness max and roughness minimum, you can adjust this and make it more dull, make it more shiny, and just tweak how the roughness will look and how the light is going to bounce off. So let's make this shiny, very shiny, because I want to go back and bring back the dirt mask that you can use the variation. So we have very shiny ceramic tile right now. And then for the dirt, let me enable it back. For the dirt right now, everything is very shiny for the dirt. Both the ceramic tiles and the dirt is not very shiny. It should be very dull. It should not reflect and bounce light off to the way that ceramic tiles does. So you have ability to adjust roughness dirt mask variation. And you can adjust this and this will tweak to make that dirt not shiny. And you also have contrast controls if you need to adjust more. Actually, let me reset it and turn this off. That's just for on a case-by-case basis if you want to experiment. I would stick with roughness dirt mask variation. So the values that you adjusted here will also play in effect with the roughness, as well as the roughness you adjusted for the ceramic tile. So these values have to be kind of tweaked together. And there's no one value that defines everything. Everything kind of reacts off of each other. So you kind of have to go back and forth and adjust it and tweak everything together and then kind of go back and forth to make that dirt less shiny. Here we go. Go higher above 1. And now I have the dirt, not very shiny, it's very dull. And the ceramic tiles where the dirt is not is still shiny. So that creates a nice little variation that was important to introduce. And with these two parameters, dirt variation on top, and then as well as roughness can be used together, as well as individually. If you don't want to use dirt variation, just focus on roughness and adjust how shiny or how dull your tiles are. But now you have that additional variation of introducing some dirt in your environments on top of this tile across all the ceramic tiles, thus changing the look and the feel of your environment. All right, let me go ahead and reset everything to their defaults. I'll just hit everything for all the values and just reset them. And then let's turn it off. And we're back to the default. And then you have ability to increase the normal map intensity. So if you come over here a little closer, I already changed it to 2. Let me reset it back down to default of 1. So if you want to make those tiles pop further out and kind of create more indentation and create more that illusion that the ceramic tiles are raised above the surface and the grout is deeper in, increase the normal map intensity, enable this value, and then go higher. Let's go to 5. You don't want to go too high, but I just want to emphasize it for effect. So here's at 5. These tiles are really popping off. I'll kind of want to bring it down. It's a little too strong. So maybe a value of 3 will work. So you have that ability. And then last you have texture tiling. Texture tiling is kind of like your last go-to because you do have different ceramic tile textures you can use. Larger ones, these medium ones, 2 of them, and the smaller ones. But if you wanted and you decided you like the look of these tiles because they're all different, but you want to have smaller versions of these tiles, the tiny tiles, but have the same look and feel, go ahead and enable tiling on X and Y and change them. Let's say I want to increase it to 2. Now everything is increased. The mask will still work for the tiling as well, so you're not going to get any problems that the mask is not different. The mask is being tiled also, so you can still change the color, still affect the tile, everything will be updated. And it just allows you to continue using the same ceramic tile texture, but increasing or decreasing the tiling. As well as, let me reset these. Actually, let me change it to, let's say I want to use 1.5 or some other value. And then if you ever need to adjust the offset, just enable offset. And then you can move these textures, this material instance, and kind of align it. So if for one part of the environment, for some static meshes, you need to make that grout adjustment to be on an edge, you can use offset to do so on X and on Y. And then of course you also have ability to rotate these material instances and textures for different design if you need it. So this is how you use the material instance for ceramic tiles. The same thing applies, let me close this, go back to materials, for the metal. Metals have exactly the same controls. Let me go ahead and actually apply. Let's work with the 0.1 because that's the one I like. That's the one that's being used on most of the meshes by default. Let me just drag it on here and then open it. The metal also has pretty much the same controls as the ceramic tiles. I don't see myself changing this very much other than maybe including the dirt mask. The only thing that's missing from the albedo is the pattern. Of course, you don't need the ceramic tile pattern on the metal, so that's been removed. But you can change the albedo color for this metal if you need it to whatever else you need. So if you need to adjust that color for the metal, you can. As well as sometimes you may want to add a dirt mask. And the dirt mask works exactly the same way. I'm going to go ahead and just turn it off because we already covered this. Same controls apply, same values, same names, same parameters. You have normal map intensity, you have your roughness controls if you want to make this more dull or more shiny, as well as tiling and offset and rotation if you need it. So we're not going to go through these because we already went through the ceramic tiles since they are exactly the same. If you know how to use one, you'll know how to use the other. Next up is the emissive. The emissive material itself is very simple and it only has the emissive color and intensity, and everything is propagated into a material instance. So let's take a look at the light. This is where the emissive property is going to come from the lights themselves, as well as from their one sphere shape. Let's open this up. And just to note, I do have a light that's emitting and giving more light from the light source itself, not just the emissive property. So the emissive property will give off illumination. If I delete this light, you can see that we do have light from the emissive, but it is recommended that you add a light source as well. You do not want to light your entire environment with emissive lights alone, with emissive material. You have to add a physical light to it. So by enabling emissive color and emissive intensity, you can increase the intensity of the emissive, make sure it's real time, and let's bump it up to 50. You can see that it gives off more light. Let's decrease it to 10, as well as you can change the color. I'm going to move this light that we have temporarily out of the way, so you can see that you can change color of the light itself, as well as increase the intensity. Now, because you need a physical light, let me go ahead and bring that back. You should position it underneath the emissive light. And then if you're going to change color of the emissive, you should also change to the same color the light itself so it matches. So you would just copy this value from the emissive color, select your light, and then paste it into the color parameter here. So they both match. And I did this for everything. You can see in all the rooms or the hallways. Let me reset this so it's back to defaults. I've placed a physical light underneath it. Some include a rectangular light, others have a spotlight. But if you're going to use an emissive property, which you have to, of course, if you have a light source and you need interior lighting, you need a lamp, you need a light to emit light from, and you're going to be using the emissive, increasing the intensity, changing the color, you should also add a physical light underneath it. And of course, the lights can be found right here in the place actor panel. You have your point light, you have your spotlight, you have your rectangular light. And the ones that I'm using primarily are rectangular lights, spotlights, as well as some point lights here and there. So emissive properties allow you to change the intensity and the emissive color for the light sources that you have. And the reason you want to have a physical light, let me come over here and I'm going to change this one. I'm going to reset it to default. The reason you want to is because if I go ahead and let's drag this out, and if you're only using emissive color from the material to light your environments, you're going to have some artifacts. Let me bring this back up, the emissive instance, and let's increase it to 5. If you take a look at the areas right here in the shadows, there's going to be flickering and artifacts when you're using emissive lights alone. And you can see right here, little waviness, little artifacts that are happening right there. And that's why you need a physical light. Emissive property alone is not enough, and you will have artifacts. And very last, you have your water pool material. Let me open this up. And water pool, this is the material itself, fairly simple. It uses a shading model that is single layer water. And then it has a normal map that's controlling the waves and the motion, and quite a few parameters for you to change and tweak how this water will look. The material instance already been changed to get this water right here, the one that you see inside the showcase environment and on the plane itself. So when you drag a plane, let's go ahead and into a new environment right here maybe. So let's drag that water plane in here. I'm going to raise it up and let's increase it. So I'm going to scale this out just so we can kind of experiment with this for a little bit. And this is the water by default that you get. Let's open up the material instance. Let me go ahead and navigate to it and open up the material instance. So you can see that I've adjusted the properties right here to get the water that you need. If you go ahead and reset everything. And this is the default water. So you have ability to change opacity of the water. You can increase or decrease the water timeline. You can increase or decrease the water intensity. So right now you can see that the waves are too strong, especially for pool water. And you may want to increase it. So with the value that I was using, I think it was 0.95. And then you can adjust water color. This is what I was using to change the water color to more teal. And then you have water color amount. So this kind of intensifies the color more or less depending on the water color amount that you want. 5 value, that's what I was using. Then you have water scattering depth amount. This is how dark and what color the depth of the water will be. Let me change the color first. So since I reset it, you're not going to see much change. Let's choose a different color. So the depth color is different than the water color. And the deeper the water goes, you can change that color to be a darker color or a completely other color that you may want to use. So just for the effect, I'm going to choose red. And then I'm going to increase water scattering depth amount. And at a certain point, at a certain depth, you'll begin to see that color. So you can see right there, the higher the water surface level is to the bottom, you begin to see that depth color. And you can increase it even more. And it's going to start mixing with the main color itself. Now, usually you'll have the color that's going to match the water surface level. So let me change it, something like this, more of a teal. And let me bring down the value right now because that's too much. You can see the bottom of the pool or the bottom of the hallway. I can now see a little bit more when I decrease the water scattering depth amount. And maybe I can make it a different color as well. So by increasing, decreasing, and kind of playing around with these values, you'll get a different effect for the water, as well as the depth of the water and what it does. And of course, if you need it to be more clear or more murky, you have your opacity amount. And then you have your 4 properties for texture panning. So this is the normal map and the movement of it. And you have 2 values for X and 2 values for Y. This allows you to have that water that kind of stays in the same spot. It's not moving forward or back. It's still water. and it's controlled by these positive and negative values on X and Y. If you need to increase the amount, you can see now it's beginning to flow more. Just play around with these values and just increase them and decrease them. And for still water in the pools, I was using very low amounts. So you might have to decrease these to the amount that you'd want. And maybe let's do wave intensity to 0.5 so we can see better. And modify these values even more so to make that pool water effect, since usually you don't get any waves inside of a pool. And then I would increase the wave intensity normal to 0.95. And then very last thing, I included a post-process volume just for fun, just to show you what you could do in order to change the look and the feel of when you're underwater. So by default, since it's a flat plane, when you go below this water, nothing changes. You no longer see water. And actually, let me go into this environment right here. If you go below the water, nothing changes since you no longer see the water plane. But in this section for the pool, when you go below it, I included a post-process volume. And when you go right into it, it changes the look and the feel of when you're underneath it. Just to give you an idea of what is possible, and with some tweaks, you can change it even further. And change it to what you would want your underwater look and feel to be. Now, this is a simple post-process volume, and there's a second volume. So this first post-process volume controls the overall exposure in the map. And there's a second one that's just when you enter the pool water in this pool, in this room. And let me search for post-process. And it's this one right here, post-process volume 2 water. And if you just take a look at the modified properties, clicking on this gear icon, and then choose only modified properties, you can take a look what I changed. So I changed some global settings, changed the gamma, the contrast, added some depth of field, and some vignette. And this is the effect you get. And these are just a few settings that I changed. But of course, post-process volume has a lot more settings for you to tweak and change how you want it. So this was just a quick example, but then you can go through your post-process volume and modify it to exactly what you would want. So with that, you have everything you need to get started for how to use your static meshes, your materials, and your material instances. And now you can create infinity tiled rooms and pools.